I'm Tracy Sable. Tonight on EWTN News Nightly, Eye on the Middle East. Why President Joe Biden is speaking out against the proposed judicial reform in Israel. Race for the White House. Analysis of the legal challenges facing former President Donald Trump. Fighting back. We hear from a woman in North Carolina who filed a lawsuit following her gender transition surgery. And mercy from age to age. Why the young and old gathered yesterday at the Vatican. These stories and more tonight.
From EWTN, the Global Catholic Network, this is EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you for being with us on the Feast of St. Charbel. Our top story tonight, Israeli lawmakers have approved a key portion of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's plan to reshape the country's justice system. This despite massive protests and a warning from President Joe Biden against it. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen.
That's right, Tracy. In that statement to Axios, President Joe Biden said, quote, "It looks like the current judicial reform proposal is becoming more divisive, not less."
Israeli police use water cannons to disperse protesters opposed to a judicial overhaul aimed at curbing the powers of the judiciary. The vote came after a raucous session in which opposition lawmakers chanted shame and stormed out. President Joe Biden told Axios in a statement late Sunday, given the range of threats and challenges confronting Israel right now, it doesn't make sense for Israeli leaders to rush this. The focus should be on pulling people together and finding consensus. And the White House press secretary issuing this statement today, reading in part, "As a lifelong friend of Israel, President Biden has publicly and privately expressed his views that major changes in a democracy to be enduring must have as broad a consensus as possible. It is unfortunate that the vote today took place with the slimmest possible majority." Meanwhile, Ukraine, the fighting continues. The Transfiguration Cathedral, one of several landmarks damaged in a deadly attack in Odessa. And in his effort to stop taxpayers from funding travel-related expenses for abortion in the military, Senator Tommy Tuberville tweets, "An unprecedented change to the military's abortion policy ought to go before the people's elected representatives in Congress. No matter what Democrats say, I'm going to keep my word."
Also tonight, according to a CNN report which looked at some Fox Business polling, 7 Republican presidential candidates will get to debate in Milwaukee come this August. They met the polling threshold, and those candidates are Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis, Vivek Ramaswamy, Mike Pence, Nikki Haley, Tim Scott, and Chris Christie. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
A federal judge says the trial for former President Donald Trump will start next May. The former president is charged with illegally retaining hundreds of classified documents from his time at the White House, claims he strongly denies. Trump is also facing trial in New York on charges of falsifying business records. We go now to Representative Dennis Ross, director of the American Center for Political Leadership at Southeastern University and former congressman from Florida. Representative Ross, great to be with you. As you know, the trial date for former President Trump is set for next May, as we mentioned. What do you make of the timing, and do you think it will help or hurt him? And what comes next?
Well, this former president has been incredibly resilient, and he gets a lot of popularity with the more attacks. I think that the trial in May leaves open by Judge Cannon the opportunity to postpone it till after the election, which I think judicial discretion is the better part of reason. Imagine this being the front runner, the nominee for the Republican Party under indictment, under investigation, at trial, leading up to a general election. I don't think our democracy can withstand that, as fragile as it is, going into an election. And the optics look pretty bad. These extenuating circumstances have to be considered by Judge Cannon. And I'm glad they didn't have the trial in December as the prosecution wanted, but having it in May is probably going to do more harm to the fabric of this democracy, of our country, and it may give Trump a boost. Who knows? But I don't think it's going to be the best opportunity to bring people together. I think it's if he is the presumptive nominee in May or leading up to May, I think the judge ought to consider continuing the trial till after the election, and who knows what's going to happen in that election.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, he is also facing the charges in New York as well. Of course, charges he strongly denies. Can you take us through the impact of these charges and maybe how the trials could have an impact on him and his race for the White House, if at all?
Well, yeah. I mean, first of all, it depletes his resources. I mean, he's got to be constantly raising money to pay for his legal defenses. Those are some serious distractions, too, not only from a financial perspective, but also from a public relations perspective. He has a base of support that is very solid and is always going to be there no matter what happens. But I think that as time goes on, you know, it looks as though he is trying to be dissuaded because of these trials, because of his accusations, because of the investigations, to either say, look, I'm not going to run anymore, which I don't think will ever happen with Donald Trump. It is going to wear on him. At 77 years old, I know he's bragging about being in great shape, but this is going to wear on him. However, he is by far leading the presidential primary polls. So, you know, maybe all this is helping him out. And the other interesting thing is, let's assume he's convicted in March by this New York court. You know, he, as a convicted felon, he could still be president. There's no prohibition against that. So it's going to be interesting to watch. I think it is going to require a lot of endurance on his part to withstand what lays ahead of him in the various courts.
Yeah, indeed. We'll see what happens. Very interesting there. We have maybe a minute, sir, left, but I do want to get to this. According to the New York Post, a former business associate of Hunter Biden is set to testify on Capitol Hill this week regarding President Joe Biden's participation in around a dozen business calls with his son Hunter. How do you see this playing out? And what do you think will come from it?
Well, I don't think we've seen the silver bullet yet. The FD 1023 form that Senator Grassley released and that Congressman James Comer referred to previously is merely allegations of an informant of what they say happened in terms of Hunter Biden's illegal payments and whatnot from Burisma. There's got to be some corroborating evidence. And if this person who comes forward can corroborate that, and unimpeachably corroborate that, meaning that it's more than likely than not provable fact, then this has to be taken by the Department of Justice seriously. It has to be pursued, and it will not go away until it is resolved.
All right, we got to leave it right there. Representative Ross, great to have you on again. Good to see you.
Thank you, Tracy.
Do UFOs exist? And if they do they pose a threat to national security? Well, that is a question many in Congress have asked for years without answers. Now lawmakers on both sides are ramping up efforts to find out and are now demanding transparency from military and intelligence officials. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales has the latest.
Good evening, Tracy. You know, lawmakers say that they've been stonewalled for years by the government about hundreds of UFO sightings reported by Navy pilots. House Oversight Committee members previewed a hearing this week about the pilots' encounters.
We've had a heck of a lot of pushback about this hearing. We've had members of Congress who fought us. We've had members of the intelligence community and also the Pentagon. Even NASA backed out on us. There are a lot of people who don't want this to come to light.
Republican Congressman Tim Burchett adds the American people need to know.
This is ridiculous, folks. They do exist or they don't exist. They keep telling us they don't exist, but they block every opportunity for us to get a hold of the information to prove that they do exist. And we're going to get to the bottom of it, dadgummit, whatever the truth may be. We're done with the cover-up.
Wow, look at him try. Lawmakers recounted a recent visit to a Florida Air Force base to meet with pilots about their UFO sightings, but were blocked by top military personnel.
If the Department of the Air Force, if the Pentagon thinks that they're above Congress, they have something else coming to them. We told them we were going to do this if they continued to hide information, and ultimately, the American people deserve the facts.
Lawmakers promise this hearing will be different.
The hearing is really about real life accounts from reliable people, and as the technology is getting better, our technology is getting better, we're now capturing these things on our handheld devices. And why is the military and the government not just being honest with us? Why are they overclassifying it? Why aren't they being transparent?
If we continue to get stonewalled, if we smell that they're giving us a bunch of BS, we are going to do the field hearings directly at those locations, and we're going to open it up to the press.
Several senators have introduced an amendment to the NDAA requiring that government records related to UFOs be made public. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
In Russia, President Vladimir Putin signed a measure today outlawing gender transition surgeries. The legislation bans any medical attempts to change a person's biological sex. This follows the country's decision back in 2020 to ban same-sex marriage. Meantime, here in the U.S., a woman in North Carolina who previously underwent a so-called gender transition as a teen, is now suing the medical professionals, including the doctors and therapists who oversaw her medicalized gender transition. Prisha Mosley has struggled with her mental health issues since childhood and says doctors began setting her on the path of gender transition when she was just 16 years old. She alleges that doctors told her that by transitioning, her mental health problems would be solved. And we go now to Prisha Mosley and her attorney, Josh Payne. Great to be with you both. Thank you so much for your time. Prisha, I want to start with you. First off, I want to say I am so sorry for everything that you have gone through. Before we get to your lawsuit, quickly, can you tell us what led up to it? And when you realized what a mistake so-called transitioning was for you and how you felt?
What led up to it was mental illness, a fast and strong puberty, a sexual assault, and online indoctrination. And then all of that came together and I was affirmed by my doctors. There was no pushback. It was only lies and promises of cures. And, the place I'm at now is, detransition and trying to heal.
Can you explain to us, Prisha, quickly, physically what happened to you when you transitioned and what life is like for you now? I mean, do you have any complications or health issues from those procedures that you underwent?
I have a myriad of complications with which no doctors will help me. And it's completely irreversible. My shoulders are overgrown and my hips are too small, making me disproportionate, clumsy, and in pain. I have severe vaginal atrophy, which makes my sexual organs dysfunctional, and I'm most likely infertile. I'll never have my breasts back, and I suffer with phantom breast syndrome as well.
This is so sad. I'm so sorry. Why do you think these medical professionals involved in your care, why do you think they guided you towards transitioning rather than seeking, mental health, or other type of treatment?
I mean, I'm only guessing here, but it could have just been to make money. Also, one of the mental illnesses I'm diagnosed with, borderline, is notoriously difficult to treat. So maybe it was just easier to...
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Josh, I'm going to talk to you now about the lawsuit specifically. Tell us a little bit more about it. I understand that you're filing 7 counts against those involved in Prisha's transitioning for things such as medical malpractice, inflicting emotional distress, and fraud.
That's right. As alleged in the complaint, on behalf of Prisha, we are helping her seek justice in this case, to hold her healthcare providers accountable, and to hopefully prevent this tragedy from happening to anyone else. I know that's an important part of the message that Prisha is hoping to convey. And she is bringing suit against the doctors and the counselors that misled her into this path of cross-sex hormone therapy, which really means injecting large amounts of testosterone into her female body and removing her healthy breasts. Procedures that did not cure her mental health problems, but in fact made them worse, as she lays out in her case.
Josh, what comes next for your case? Where are you right now? And I'm wondering, what do you hope comes from it?
We hope that we can help Prisha seek justice and hold her healthcare providers accountable. They will be allowed an opportunity to respond to the lawsuit that has been filed. And we hope that Prisha is afforded her day in court and is able to prove her claims and obtain that justice that she is so desperately seeking and in need of.
We have about 30 seconds left or so, but Prisha, I want to give you the final word. What would you like people to know?
There's no way to medicalize your body that will fix your mental health. I mean, we have actually tried this with lobotomies. You were born as yourself. There's no changing that needs to be done to be yourself or become more yourself. You were born that way.
Well, thank you both so much for coming on and speaking to us. We're going to follow this case, and God bless you both.
Thank you.
And we have a lot more still to come here on EWTN News Nightly, including Front Page News. The popular magazine highlights a TV series about the life of Christ and how Pope Francis celebrated World Grandparents' Day at the Vatican. It is one of the most popular magazines in the country, and today one of the most popular TV series is gracing its cover. The Chosen, starring Catholic actor Jonathan Roumie as Jesus, landed the latest cover of TV Guide magazine for its July 24th through August 13th edition, out today. A caption on the cover reads, "How an epic series about Jesus Christ became a surprising success." And joining us now to talk more about this and more is Margaret Olohan, senior writer with The Daily Signal. Margaret, great to see you again. I want to talk about the TV Guide and The Chosen, but first, I want to get your thoughts on our previous guest, Prisha Mosley, and her lawsuit. I know it's a story that you've been following. It's so tragic. Do you think we'll see more of these cases?
Oh, absolutely, Tracy. We have seen a number of these cases coming up in recent weeks. Campbell Miller Payne, I believe Josh was on the last segment. That law firm is representing not only Prisha, but also another girl who filed last week, Soren, another young woman that underwent a gender transition or an attempted gender transition when she was only 17 years old and is now suing her doctors and therapists that facilitated this gender transition, affirmed every move she made, put her into testosterone, where she began injecting herself, a biological female, with these very harmful substances to try and become a man. Obviously, that doesn't work because that's not possible. And then when she found that she wasn't feeling better, she wasn't feeling more comfortable in her body, she underwent a double mastectomy, just like Prisha did. And both of these girls and several others that we know of now deeply regret these procedures that they underwent, and we know them as detransitioners. And that's a word that we're going to be hearing more and more about, because for a while, a lot of this was just going under the radar. You know, these people weren't coming back to their doctors and saying, I regret this, because that's widely held to be, you know, the medical professionals hear that and they think that was a failure, and they don't want you to know about that. They just want you to think that these are successes. We talk about gender affirming care. That's the fake euphemism for what these procedures are, these irreversible surgeries. The doctors that are performing these, they want you to think that there's a success rate with all of them. They want you to believe that everyone likes it, everyone is affirmed, and they go off on their merry way as another gender. That's not true, and that's what these lawsuits are proving, and we are definitely going to see more.
Yeah, meantime, out in California, Governor Gavin Newsom fined a school district $1.5 million because its board members voted to reject a state-endorsed curriculum that mentions a gay rights advocate by the name of Harvey Milk, who apparently had a so-called relationship with a 16-year-old boy when he was in his 30s. Margaret, what more do we know about this? And shouldn't the parents and the school district, shouldn't they have a say-so in what their children are learning?
Parents absolutely should have a say in what their children are learning. And California is a good example to the rest of the country of how far these things can go. You know, maybe 10 years ago, this was kind of the thing that you only heard from parents that were super keyed in with their kids' education, parents who maybe they homeschooled because they were worried about things like this. And now, all over the country, you see examples of how teachers and woke curriculums and woke school districts are working little things in order to teach your children things that maybe you would never even bring up if it was up to you. And obviously, parents are the ones who get to decide what their children should learn. Parents are the ones who have the final say in what their children get to learn. And I think this might empower more and more parents to say, actually, no, I'm in charge. I decide what my kids learn. And no governor or teacher or woke school district gets to have a say in that.
Yeah, I want to circle back now to The Chosen and TV Guide. I want to get your thoughts on that. I mean, pretty significant to have it right there front and center on the cover of TV Guide. What do you make of that? And also, what do you think that signals and says about the hunger for faith-based programming?
Well, I think it says a lot, Tracy. I think more people out there are responding to this message. They're responding to the message of The Chosen. We've heard from so many people that this is well-made television. It's pleasant to watch, but also the message is resonating with a lot of people. We're hungry for the truth. We're hungry for, the actuality of what is going on in our world. And I think in so many places, you can't find that. You can't find the actual truth, which as Catholics, we believe is God. And you'll find happiness and much more peace in understanding our world from the proper oriented lens. And so I think that's part of the reason that The Chosen is doing so well. And I hope to see more faith-based movies like that doing like it. You know, we've seen that Sound of Freedom has been doing very well. That's also put on by Angel Studios, and it's not necessarily a faith-based film, but it is absolutely blowing out of the water in terms of numbers, in terms of people going to see it, people buying tickets to help other people see it. and push this message that we need to pay attention to child sex trafficking.
Yeah, absolutely we do. Mary Margaret, so much we can talk about. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Always great to be with you. Thanks for weighing in.
Thank you.
Up next on EWTN News Nightly, by the roots. Pope Francis warns the faithful about uprooting the weeds of the world. Plus, an update on a priest and world-famous artist accused of sexual misconduct. Well, the Jesuits have confirmed that famous artist and priest Father Marco Rupnik has been expelled from the religious order. Father Rupnik was accused by several women of sexual, spiritual, and psychological abuse over 30 years. The Jesuits determined the claims to be, quote, very highly credible. Rupnik remains a Catholic priest, but outside of the Jesuit order. Well, Pope Francis issues a warning against judging our neighbors and trying to create a perfect world by uprooting the weeds.
Come ci piace spelare gli altri, come ci piace.
During a Sunday address at the Vatican, the Holy Father said that it is smart to look for weeds in our own hearts, and by uprooting bad habits and being patient with others, we will bring out the best in ourselves and those around us. Finally tonight, Pope Francis invited around 8,000 grandparents and elderly to attend Mass yesterday at the Vatican. It was part of an initiative started by the Holy Father 3 years ago. EWTN Vatican journalist Rudolph Gehrig has more.
On Sunday, July 23rd, Pope Francis celebrated the Third World Day for Grandparents and the Elderly in Rome. Its motto, His Mercy is from age to age, captured the essence of the celebration. During the Holy Mass in St. Peter's Basilica, Pope Francis stressed that young people and the elderly should look out for and support each other.
Stiamo attenti che le nostre città.
Let us be careful so that our crowded cities do not become centers of loneliness, that politics, called to provide for the needs of the most fragile, never forgets the elderly, nor allows the market to banish them as unprofitable waste. May we not chase after the utopias of efficiency and performance at full speed, lest we become incapable of slowing down to accompany those who struggle to keep up. Please, let us mingle and grow together.
Cresciamo insieme.
Pope Francis introduced the World Day for Grandparents and the Elderly in 2021.
I nonni tante volte sono dimenticati.
Grandparents are often forgotten, and we forget this wealth of preserving roots and passing on. This is why I have decided to establish World Day for Grandparents and the Elderly, which will be held throughout the Church every year on the fourth Sunday of July, close to the feasts of St. Joachim and Anne, Jesus' grandparents.
The Holy Father repeatedly reminded the faithful that the elderly are not merely people whom the Church is called to safeguard, but are also protagonists of a pastoral evangelizing ministry. They are privileged witnesses of God's faithful love, Francis said. In his annual message for World Day of Grandparents and the Elderly 2023, Pope Francis called on young people to visit their grandparents or an elderly person as part of their preparation for World Youth Day, which begins next week in Lisbon, Portugal. In Rome, Rudolph Gehrig, EWTN News Nightly.
And we thank you for watching tonight. Remember, you can follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at EWTN News Nightly. I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.